Hello everyone. Today we are going to learn about two important concepts of data, which is continuous versus discrete data. So primarily data can be segregated into two main things. One is continuous and one is discrete data. So what is discrete data? Discrete data is something that is countable, like number of apples in a basket, or number of students in a class, or number of cars in a parking lot. This can be countable. It's a whole number, like it does not have any points like 25.05 or 50.12, something like that. It is always a whole number, just like an integer. It can be countable. Basically you can count the discrete data. Now we will look into the continuous data so that we can understand the difference between the discrete data and continuous data. Okay, so also one more thing here, if you would like to visualize the discrete data, you can see, like for example in this case, in 2020 how many voters have voted. So for example 1000 members have voted in 2020, in the year 2020, and in 2021 how many users have how many voters have voted in the state or in a constituency. So let us assume it's 800 in 2020. So this is discrete data. It's always like in numbers. Now coming to the continuous data. So continuous data is something that you can measure. It's not like something you can count. Discrete data is something that you can count, whereas continuous data is something that you can measure. And continuous data is always like in points, like for example which is not fixed. For example, the height of students in a class, assume it's not a number like 5, 6 or 3, 4, 5 or 6, 7, something like that. It's always like 165.2, 165.3 or 167 or 168 or 170. It's or 170.5. It can take a range of values. Okay, so this is a major difference that we have to identify between discrete data and continuous data. Discrete data is simply countable data, number of cars, number of apples, number of people, whereas the continuous data is the measure, like what is the temperature and all. And if you look at the continuous data, if you have to plot the continuous data, if you want to visualize the continuous data, it's always better to use a histogram to see the distribution, how the data is distributed. So I will also talk about histogram and bar chart in a separate session, but for now, for this session, the histogram is nothing but it takes some buckets of information and shows the data, relevant data. For example, in this case, the heights of students from 161 centimeters to 164 centimeters are around 4 people in the class, and there are like around 5 persons with the height 164 to 167, and there are good number of people with height 167 and 170, and there are also like around more than 20 students in the class whose height is more than 170. So ignore this marks scored by students, it's actually heights of the students. So this way you can plot the continuous data. So this we call as a histogram. There is a very small difference between histogram and a bar chart that we will discuss in detail, but for now, if you want to visualize, it would be always a range of data for a continuous data. Okay, whereas for a discrete data it would be a bar chart. The main difference you can see is the gaps between the bars, like there is no range. It's only on 2020 year how many voters have voted, on 2021 year how many voters have voted. Whereas for continuous data, from 161 to 164, it's a range, how many people are there. So this range on x-axis varies for the histogram and bar chart. And one more major difference is that there are gaps between the bars in the bar chart, whereas in the histogram you do not have any gaps, because we are checking the ranges from 161 to 164.3. Again, from 164.3 to 167.3, how many people are there? We can't skip any number, like we can't ignore 160. We can't start from 165, right? Because there can be students who can be 164.5 as well. So histogram, there are no gaps in between. So to keep in mind, like how to remember this, discrete data is countable, like 1 2 3 4 5, you can count on your fingertips, for example. And continuous data is a measure. For example, always remember in mind, a measure is something like a temperature or a height, or like how much time for a person it took to complete the online shopping. So all these kind of information, it's not always like 1 hour 2 hours, it will be like 47 minutes, 57 point some, like that kind of data that we have to see.